we wanted to share with you how the best e-commerce teams are building out their front-end infrastructure with products like Vercel and BigCommerce, so you don't end up with this kind of unfortunate situation where you have to make your site unavailable to your customers who want to shop with you at peak time. We'll kick off with a couple of intros. So my name is Matt Froggatt. I'm a sales engineer at Vercel in Europe. So I'm working closely with prospects and customers to help them understand how the Vercel solution works and how it fits into their businesses. Prior to working at Vercel, I was quite conveniently a sales engineer at BigCommerce. So I'm super familiar with some of the challenges that merchants and developers face when building out headless storefronts. And I'm joined today by Ben. Ben, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. My name is Ben Ackles, and I'm a product marketing manager here at BigCommerce. I've been here for about a year, and before that, I was in agency land and working on different sites in a different focus area, but this was always my passion of headless. And so when I came to BigCommerce, headless is what we call strategic focus areas, and it's where I spend most of my time on messaging around headless and developer experience. So really excited about this topic and one of our favorite partners, Vercel. So let's kick things off.
Perfect. So we have an action-packed agenda for everybody today. First, we're going to walk through some of the top reasons as to why you would consider going headless, and specifically why you would go headless with Vercel and BigCommerce. We're going to show you a quick demo as to how easy you can get started with a headless storefront connected to a BigCommerce store, and that's using our pre-built integrations and templates. And then we're going to run through a couple of examples of merchants using BigCommerce and Vercel that you can play around with at home. And right at the end, we're going to have a Q&A section. So any questions that you have throughout the session, pop them in the Q&A box and we'll come back to them at the end of the session. But before we go too far, let's kick things off with the basics. So Ben, maybe you could tell everybody what exactly is headless commerce?
Sure. So before we get into headless commerce, what is headless itself? Headless is the decoupling of the front end from the back end, and connected via APIs. So the front end is Next.js, and it's usually deployed. It has to be deployed somewhere, like Vercel. And it's decoupled from the back end. The back end being the business logic, where you manage your store, your content, your products, your customers and orders. Altogether, for headless commerce, the back end would be like BigCommerce. The front end would be the presentation layer where the customers interact, Next.js, and deployed to something like Vercel. So that's what headless commerce is, but why do we even want to go headless? Matt, why don't you explain some of the reasons why you would go headless?
Yeah, sure thing. So obviously Black Friday has just been, Christmas is right around the corner. And I'm sure I don't need to explain this to everybody on the session, but both of these are peak trading times for many online retailers, and ensuring our infrastructure could handle the load was top of mind for everybody at Vercel and everybody at BigCommerce. And ahead of Christmas and the next big peak, we wanted to share with you how the best e-commerce teams are building out their front-end infrastructure with products like Vercel and BigCommerce, so you don't end up with this kind of unfortunate situation where you have to make your site unavailable to your customers who want to shop with you at peak time. So there are countless reasons why you would consider going headless, but we're going to highlight some of our 4 favorites over the next few slides. So throughout all of these slides, we're going to go into much more detail into each of these points, but we're going to be covering off faster iteration, developer experience, cost savings, performance and scalability, and then customization and personalization. So first up, we have faster iteration. So iteration velocity is the measure of how quickly you can ship changes into production, and it covers off all aspects of the change process. So when thinking about iteration velocity, we may consider things like, how quickly do you ideate as a business? How quickly can developers write, test, and ship code? Are they blocked by inefficiencies in your workflow or by the process of deploying your web application? How quickly can stakeholders feedback and then collaborate with other developers on the team? This is a wide-reaching topic and something we believe to be one of the most important benefits of going headless that you may not have thought of or may not have considered before. And at Vercel, we believe that fast iteration is the solution to most problems on the web. Iterating quickly allows you to deliver new functionality and campaigns on your storefront. So this might be things like a Black Friday campaign or a new deals page or a Christmas campaign or a deals page that you might need to deliver super last minute. Iterating quickly allows you to decrease experimentation time and see which experiments have a positive effect on conversion rate. Iterating quickly allows you to squash more bugs and improve the customer experience of your storefront. All of these things can obviously have a material impact on your revenue. The faster you iterate, the more likely you are to improve your revenue. But you may be thinking, how exactly does this tie back to headless commerce? Well, as Ben explained earlier, headless involves decoupling the front end. This is basically the view that customers see, decoupling the front end or the presentation layer from the back-end e-commerce platform. So instead of having to worry about the whole e-commerce platform when developing changes, developers can focus solely on that front-end experience. Many existing e-commerce applications are large monolith applications, and these kind of applications are notoriously difficult to develop, test, and deploy. If your application is getting in the way of development, how could you ever iterate quickly with that kind of setup? So Vercel is the platform for front-end developers, and we have a number of functionalities included to supercharge the iteration velocity of your headless front end. So to kick it off, we have preview deployments. So using our automated CI/CD workflow, any changes that developers push will deploy a new preview environment for everybody in your team to preview and test new changes quicker than they would if they were like pushing to a staging environment or pushing to a development environment. Building on top of that, we have preview comments. So this is included within preview deployments. This is some functionality that we launched very, very recently. And it allows everybody in the team to provide context-rich feedback directly inside that preview environment. So this is drastically shortening the time it takes to go from development, a developer working on a change, through testing and feedback, back into development, and then eventually onto production. So we are basically doing to front-end development what Google did to collaborative documents. And then finally, on Vercel, you have supercharged builds. When building your front-end application ready for testing or ready for production, don't let slow builds get in your way. Vercel is constantly optimizing the build step of your application, and this ensures that you can get to market as quickly as possible with any fixes, any campaigns that you have going out. So next up, we have developer experience, or DX, as it is also known. And this is tightly connected to the previous point. But again, we think this is a super important point that you may not have thought of. So we gave it its own slide in this presentation. So DX is all about the experience of developers as they're developing software, or in the case of e-commerce, this would be the front-end experience of your store. So good DX is going to consider everything a developer interacts with, and that could be the framework that your store is written in. That might be Next.js, it might be something like Vue.js. It's also considering the tooling and the documentation that goes along with that framework, or the e-commerce platform like BigCommerce. And it goes all the way through to how easy it is for that to be deployed and how easy it is for that application to be debugged when it's living out there in production. And you can think of DX in a similar way that you would think about UX or user experience. UX is all about the experience of users on your store, and DX is all about the experience of developers writing and maintaining the code for your store. But again, how does this relate to headless commerce? So when you're considering the framework and the development and deployment platform for your headless storefront, it's important to consider how good the developer experience of those things really is. And this is important for two main reasons. So going back to the previous slide where we talked about iteration velocity, a good DX is likely to mean that you can actually iterate faster as a team. Faster iteration means you can ship faster, it means you can experiment faster, and you can improve the customer experience of your store much faster. And then secondly, a good DX crucially means happy developers working on your store. And a good DX means that retaining and hiring talent is easier as developers want to work with the best tooling that exists. And as part of my role at Vercel, I speak to many developers, I speak to many customers, and one thing that really sticks out to me is how happy using tools like Next.js and using Vercel make all of those developers that I'm speaking to. Capitalize on that happiness and use it to drive improvements for your storefront and drive improvements for your business. And remember, non-headless monolith e-commerce applications are notoriously difficult to develop on. This is a bad developer experience, and it can have an effect on the productivity and morale of the whole team. Next up, we have cost savings, scalability, and performance. And I'm going to pass the mic over to Ben to discuss further.
Thanks, Matt. So Matt talked a little bit about how you're making developers happy, but it's also important to make your boss, or if you're the boss, you happy. So how can headless actually save you money and potentially make you money? One of the things that Vercel really enables is this serverless architecture, where serverless can greatly reduce your cost for DevOps. According to Deloitte, running workloads on serverless can save you up to 57%. It's 57% cheaper over time. That's significant cost savings that you can pour into other initiatives. You can invest in advertising, you can reallocate those funds, or you can just increase your bottom line. So it's really important that you are investing in what's going to save you money, but it also can help you make more money, increase your revenue. Serverless is not only cheaper, it's more scalable than traditional deployments. It allows you to have a highly performant storefront, and it's served at the edge. Performance is greatly tied to sales revenue. According to Deloitte, again, we used that many times, with a 1/10 of a second improvement in site speed, they observed that retail consumers spend almost 10% more. So you're getting a cost savings on the one side, and then you're actually improving the cost per order. So it's really, really helpful at any time, but especially during peak hours. A highly performant site is optimal, but even worse, and especially in the holiday season, slow sites can really hold you back, but a down site will be a blocker. During Cyber Week's the peak season for most e-commerce businesses. But if your site is down or slow, customers can't buy from you or are slowed down. During the 2 weeks ago, during Cyber Week, we saw a lot of really, really popular sites go down, including Nike, J.Crew, to name a few. So that's during the most important part of the season, you're unable to sell. That's a critical disadvantage as an e-commerce business and is prohibitive to capitalizing on that moment. So BigCommerce stores, in contrast, saw huge increases in sales during the holiday season or during the Cyber Week. We had a record year, about 23% growth year over year during the Cyber Week. We're proud to say that 100% of our platform we had 100% uptime during that period for the 9th straight year. So it's a solid platform, but even more for growing brands, they have to be deployed to the edge. They have to take advantage of some sort of serverless architecture in order to deal with those traffic spikes. So outside of the holiday season, we see this all the time. During a few weeks ago, my coworker was telling me about buying tickets for, I'm sure people who are listening to this might have been part of this, but buying tickets for Taylor Swift and using the Ticketmaster website it was a peak moment and it just shut down. All these people want to spend money, but they can't spend money. That's both frustrating for a consumer and really, really hurting the bottom line for businesses, or in this case, Taylor. But really, like for an e-commerce business, that's your lifeline. But that is your if it's the peak season or your peak moment, you're missing out and you're unable to make money, and you're really turning people away from your business. Each year, businesses lose millions and millions of dollars because of site outages, downtime during peak hours. So using something like serverless, you can kind of mitigate that problem. That's the scalability side of things. How do you scale up, and how do you have a smart infrastructure that actually allows you to scale to the demands, the changing demands? But another area, and this is another reason to go headless, it is personalization. And this has a kind of a double-edged sword. Personalization is really critical for most e-commerce campaigns. Nearly 80% of business leaders say consumers spend more when their experience is personalized. On average, that's 34% more. According to a Twilio study this year. So there's clearly a benefit to going headless, to adopting some sort of personalization in e-commerce. Personalization is where you have it's catered to the individual users. In the slide, you can see, if you're interested in a certain color or a certain size, it will kind of show the shopping experience is kind of tailor-made to you as an individual. But so there's clearly a benefit, but the downside of traditional personalization is that it can really, really slow down your site. It can cause a higher bounce rate, and cause lower customer satisfaction, higher ad spends, and poor SEO. Your Google Lighthouse scores and Core Web Vitals are negatively affected due to the performance drag. It can cause you this disjointed experience where you have cumulative layout shift, where it's just an overall poor customer experience, and it can turn customers away. But the good news is that personalization of customer experiences can actually be deployed without sacrificing on performance. So Matt, how can serverless help you deliver unique content at the edge without slowing you down?
Sure. Yeah. So just to give a bit more context around some of the pitfalls of kind of traditional or existing personalization techniques. And this is also applicable to things like experimentation, so A/B testing or multivariate testing. These are all examples of personalizing the on-page experience to different users. So the way that existing solutions will work is they will wait for the entire page to load, and then after the page has loaded, they would typically load in some additional JavaScript, or they'll load in tests or something needed to do the personalization. And then after the page is loaded and this JavaScript is loaded, the page will be changed or mutated to go into the personalized or the form set up for the experiment. And the problem with this approach is, as Ben said, it can lead to things like cumulative layout shift, where the page is kind of jumping around or flashing in front of the user, which is a bad customer experience. And of course, loading in the testing library or the personalization library and all of the data that goes along with that is adding to the weight of the page. So that can also have a negative effect on the performance, which in turn can have an effect on conversion rate as well. So Vercel can add a huge amount of value in this particular area. So in order to combat this kind of performance issue, what you can actually do is utilize something called Edge middleware within Next.js and deployed seamlessly to Vercel. And what Edge middleware allows you to do is put decision-making logic on the edge. And when I talk about decision-making logic, I mean things like deciding which experiment to send different users to, but also deciding how to personalize the site based on the user, based on their intent. And if you put that on the edge, that compute is running before the page has actually finished loading. And then based on the outcome of that logic, you can then serve different statically generated versions of the same page. So if I'm browsing from London and Ben is browsing from Austin, Texas, we could be shown the same URL, but we could be shown different versions of that page customized to us, powered by Edge middleware. So this is mitigating the performance impact because we're just serving statically generated pages, and it's also mitigating the customer experience impact as well, because there's no code loading in after the page is loaded. There's no layout shift. It's just all happening on the edge, and it's all happening using static delivery of files. So next slide. So headless with Vercel and BigCommerce. So why would you consider, we've kind of covered off why you would consider headless and some reasons for that, but specifically why Next.js on Vercel and why Next.js on Vercel with BigCommerce. So to cover off the Next.js side first, Next.js is one of the most popular front-end development frameworks in the world. And it's not just me saying this, it's not just Vercel saying this, the numbers speak for themselves. So at this point, Next.js is being downloaded over 3.5 million times every single week. And it is powering some of the largest, most successful experiences on the internet. Next.js was created and is maintained by Vercel, and that means that when new Next.js functionality is launched, Vercel will support that from day zero. So any applications that you deploy to Vercel, your headless storefront, for example, you can make use of new Next.js functionality from day one. Vercel is the best place to deploy Next.js applications, and we have a multitude of functionality to help with all stages of development and deployment, some of which we've spoken about today. So things like preview comments, preview environments, Edge middleware, just to name a few. And because we are the creators and maintainers of Next.js, we can also support our customers with Next.js implementation challenges or best practice around how you architect storefronts for scalability and performance. But Ben, what about BigCommerce?
Sure. So BigCommerce is as it says right here, BigCommerce is the commerce platform for growing brands without imposing opinions on how your developers build and deploy. Why that's important is we give both developers the freedom to choose and really don't take a strong position on how you're going to build. You have a developer that is interested in working with Next.js as it's the most popular front-end framework out there, they're going to want to work with that. And you want to be able to provide that clear path for them to choose that. And on the other side, BigCommerce is a commerce platform that is stable. It works with large brands, growing brands, allows you to scale up for the back end, and then rely on something like Vercel to really kind of accelerate your front end experience, the experience layer. And together, I think they're just it's a perfect match. It's a perfect match of what we call best of breed, where you choose different technologies that best fit a use case. In this case, Vercel and Next.js are a nice pair, and we also have an integration too for this, which we'll demo in a second, but where you can just connect with Vercel with ease. You can connect Vercel to BigCommerce with a one-click integration, and it's a seamless experience, and it gets you a POC quickly, and then you kind of allow your developers to work in the flow that they prefer. And business owners have our merchants are able to manage their store effectively with a really solid commerce engine on the back end. So I think together they're just they're well paired together, and they really kind of allow you to take advantage of what each business does best. I'm gonna go to the next slide. So here's kind of the architecture of a headless build in the diagram. You can kind of see how this would compare to a monolith. A monolith has everything in the stack from the same vendor. So in this case, a headless architecture has on the front end, as I talked about before, the front end is the experience layer, or the customer facing layer. It's where a customer might interact with the site. That's Next.js, and it's deployed to Vercel, or deployed to the edge. And then it's connected via APIs to different services. The commerce engine being central and essential for e-commerce, that's BigCommerce. And you can choose kind of the best of breed to fit your unique needs. Every business has different needs. They might have a legacy system. They might have a developer that has a preference for Sanity or Builder.io or any sort of CMS or DXC. You can choose those. You can kind of go that path and then choose the best for each of the use cases. And you can incrementally adopt these things too. So you can choose one and then kind of add on layers and layers as you go. And then also you can take advantage of systems of record through the data layer. So you can use a PIM, a product information management system, an OMS for orders, DAM for your assets like Cloudinary, or you can use a CRM. So you have all these systems that work together that do the best for each individual function, and together they create this ecosystem that creates the best-in-class experience, and they're all kind of connected via APIs. So this is it's an up and coming and very, very popular architecture, and it's starting to be to really grow in popularity as brands have different needs, and they have unique. They need to be able to break through and remove bottlenecks for developers, and really kind of play to the developer experience.
And I think it's worth mentioning on this slide as well. Certainly from my experience at BigCommerce as a solutions engineer, and my experience here at Vercel, we see a huge amount of customers coming to us and saying, this is scary. Like there's a lot of things I need to pick. I need to have the e-commerce platform in place. I need to have the content management system in place. I need to have search. I need to have payments. I need to have all these different things that come together to replace the monolith. And how do I ever know how to pick one of these solutions? And one of the great things about BigCommerce, and one of the great things about Vercel as well, is we have huge partner networks of different technology providers, and we can reach into this partner network and find other solutions that are going to be a good fit for you and your business. And it's not just about us suggesting whoever's the most expensive or whoever, I don't know. It's all about working with you to understand the size of your business, the needs of your business, and the people working inside, so we can make the best recommendations in terms of different partners that most of the time are already pre-integrated into BigCommerce or pre-integrated into Vercel.
Right. So when we say best of breed, we mean like the best for your individual needs, and that could be based on cost, it could be based on functionality, it could be based on some unique need that your business has that you wouldn't be able to get with a monolith. Because when you have a monolith, you kind of choose, it's a bundled together, and this is what you're going to get. Whereas when you use something like Vercel and BigCommerce, we have just integrations that will tie these things together. But you're using tools that are the best in class for their individual need. And you're going to see in a second the demonstration for this, but you'll see that it's possible with at least for a POC to get up and going quite simply. So it looks kind of daunting at first because you see all these different options in front of you, but it really is fairly approachable for a business, and it really long term has a huge impact on your business.
Perfect. Let's demo.
Yeah, let's jump right in.
Potentially the most exciting bit for everybody on the call. So I'm going to flick my screen over to here. And Ben, can you just check for me? Can you see the templates?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Perfect. So we find ourselves in the Vercel template repository, and I'm just going to very quickly move a few Zoom things around so I can see what I'm doing. So this is the Vercel template repository, and this is a repository of pre-built Next.js and other framework solutions built out by our professional services team. And this aims to provide a starting point or a boilerplate that you can use to then build an application using Next.js deployed onto Vercel. And one of these templates is Next.js Commerce. So this particular template was actually built in conjunction with BigCommerce. So our solutions team worked really closely with the team at BigCommerce to build out this example storefront. And for a little while, BigCommerce was actually the only integration option for this particular storefront. And it provides a fully featured headless storefront that you can deploy in a single click. You can integrate into your existing BigCommerce store in a single click. And this could be a fully transactional storefront. And I say it could be a fully transactional storefront because you'd still need to go in and set up your payments and set up your shipping. But once you've done that, there is no real reason that this couldn't be a transactional storefront. So you can either take this and roll with it, use it as a headless storefront, or you can use it as a starting point for customization and build out your own headless experience using these best practices that we have developed for you. And what I want to show to you is just how easy it is to get going with this kind of headless storefront, because a lot of customers will say to us, like, this is actually quite a daunting thing. There's a huge amount of complexity. I need to hire developers. I need to build out an entire application from scratch. And we don't believe that that is truly the case. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit deploy here. And I'm going to take us through the flow for deploying this new storefront into my account. So we're in the Vercel dashboard and I pressed deploy, and I can now go ahead and log into my Git account. I'm going to give this a very creative name of Next.js Commerce 10, which gives away how many times I've done this. And I'm going to press create. And what happens in the background here is Vercel is taking the code that's contained within that starter store and it's transferring it over to your Git repository. We can then add a pre-built integration into this storefront. So if I go ahead and click add next to BigCommerce, it's going to take me into an integration flow, and it's going to set up all of the parameters, the API details, and the channels required to integrate Vercel into that BigCommerce storefront. So I'm going to log in. Let's just quickly log in to my store. And once that has logged in, it should take me back to Vercel, and that will then go away and start deploying that front end to my Vercel account. And while that deploys, it won't take very long, but while that deploys, we'll just jump into the BigCommerce backend and have a look at a couple of things that are relevant to the headless setup.
Okay, so we're in the control panel right now. Some people call it admin. It's where the merchant is going to manage. This is the back end. This is where you're going to manage your products, your orders, customers. So from here, we have something called the channel manager. Click on that. At the channel manager includes at the top storefronts, which is what we're going to talk about today. It has the marketplaces, which is distributing to your Walmart, but Facebook's more commonly used, Amazon, eBay. So these are all just integrations with different marketplaces. You might have point of sale systems that lists Clover, but we have other ones that you can integrate with. And then ad networks, where you can connect your products to various ad delivery systems. But at the top, so storefronts, you see the top one, it says it has a little Next.js fav icon, and then you see Vercel. That's a Next.js powered storefront. And then the second one is a Vercel demo, which is using something called Stencil, which is our headful non-headless option. One of the advantages of BigCommerce is we have both, where you can go with a more streamlined, no dev. It's like just choose a theme, get up and going quickly. That's a really great path for a lot of particularly SMB businesses that are small and really don't necessarily want to, they're not high growth businesses. They don't have the special needs that a headless storefront would need. But you can toggle between the two. You can kind of choose whether you want to have a headless storefront or a stencil, is what we call the non-headless version of the storefront. So from there, if you click into products.
And just while we're still on Channel Manager, Ben, I think something that's really cool about the BigCommerce approach with having the stencil storefront, but also having the ability to add headless channels on top of that, means that for a merchant who is already using the stencil storefront with their existing store, they can very easily play around with a headless storefront, right? Because they can just go in, they can add a new channel, they can use all of the same products, the same configuration, checkout settings, shipping, payment, and they can just play around with something like the Vercel storefront. And that's not possible with all platforms. With a lot of platforms, it might be a new deployment or something completely new, but with BigCommerce, you can incrementally adopt this headless storefront using a new channel.
That's a good point. So from here, how do you kind of get those products into your storefront? So if you clicked on the products, from there, you just select the products that you want to add or assign to that storefront. And then you, at the very top, it says add just to channel. Channel is from Channel Manager, the storefront. So you select the storefront and then you just save it. So you can take products that were first in Stencil, like Matt was talking about, incrementally adopting, starting with Stencil and then kind of graduating to a more headless build. But then you can assign those to your Next.js storefront and deploy. So from there, that's pretty much it on the BigCommerce side that's specific to Vercel. So it's pretty simple to get those products into your demo store or into the POC that we just created. So I guess if you want to check that the build is complete,
we can jump over and see how it's cooking.
Yeah, see how it's
like waiting for the turkey on Christmas Day. So if we flick over to this tab,
it's done. See, you have a cup of coffee,
congratulations
back, and
we see some confetti. Everything is good. It's all deployed out to Vercel. So I'm going to go through into the dashboard. We'll just quickly look at the deployment. So yeah, 1 minute and 19 seconds. So it was probably done before I finished talking, let alone when Ben finished speaking. So
we give it some time. It does take usually between, that was a pretty quick deployment, but usually between, a minute to 5 minutes at most. But yeah, one of the things about like deploying this way is you're deploying it all over the world too, right? Am I correct? So you're deploying it at the edge. So this is not just, nearby an origin server. This is globally distributed. It's super fast all over the world. And so that's why I think is the reason why it takes some time to build, but that's still pretty quick.
Yeah.
And once it is built, it's super fast, super performant.
Yeah. So this particular template or this Next Commerce starter store, this has been built with static generation in mind. So the product pages in the store are using something called incremental static regeneration. And that means that all of the product pages are just static content delivered from a CDN. So whereas in a traditional model, someone would request the product page, that page would be built on the fly. You'd go to the database, you'd fetch the products, you'd go somewhere else, fetch the images, and then return that eventually to the user. In this case, everything is pre-built ahead of time, and the user is just downloading statically generated content directly from the edge. And in that 1 minute and 20 seconds, exactly as Ben said, this has been deployed to the entire world. So we have something like 20 edge regions at Vercel now. So if I am visiting from London, it's super quick, it's statically generated. But if I go over to Austin, Texas, you get the same result. You get a statically generated page delivered super quick. You go over to Tokyo, you get a statically generated page delivered super quick. And achieving this level of performance with non-headless monolith applications is a very difficult problem to solve. You have to put compute everywhere. You have to put databases everywhere. And by utilizing this headless front end, it's making this kind of global deployment super accessible to loads of businesses.
Yeah. And being conscious of time, I really want to jump into that next section, the case study, because it's actually a good example of this. So this is an example of a site that is built by a company out of New Zealand. They sell in about 140 countries worldwide, but they're based in New Zealand. So if their server were in New Zealand, their origin server in New Zealand, they weren't taking advantage of something like Vercel, then every of the 140 countries that are visiting the site would have a slow experience. Or even if it weren't in New Zealand, if it were in Austin, Texas, it would be still extremely slow for a vast majority of the traffic that is coming to the site. So this is Maitoku is a company that is using the architecture we've been talking about today. It's Next.js powered, it's deployed to Vercel, and it's using BigCommerce as the commerce engine. It's super fast on mobile. It's a beautiful site. It has a lot of custom features that kind of break the mold of what maybe a stencil storefront would be able to be capable of, where you have this subscription model for their supplement product, and really they've been able to really take advantage of the built-in functionality being both, where they're located, where they're selling, the unique business needs, and also really kind of getting the best of all of those, the best of breed of all those technologies that kind of make sure that that's even capable of happening. Some highlights from this, and I encourage you to go to the case study and check out the case study yourself. But about 45% increase in revenue from when they went from non-headless, I think they were on Magento, to BigCommerce and Vercel. And then about almost twice as much as 86% increase in subscription growth. So it's been a massive win for them, and they are. I encourage everybody to kind of check out this study and learn more. But that, you want to go to the next slide? I think that we're going to have to open up for questions.
And I think we've got a few.
Oh, the first question I need to take, because it's really important. No relation.
No relation, unfortunately.
I have no relationship with Jensen Ackles, not that I know of, at least.
Okay, so
that's an actor for all those who don't know.
So coming into the Q&A then, so from the top, how do I integrate BigCommerce with Vercel? So hopefully in the little demo section, we showed you just how easy it is to integrate BigCommerce with Vercel. So if you have an existing BigCommerce store, you can just go ahead and deploy that template onto Vercel. You might need to register for a Vercel account if you don't already, but you can just press deploy in that template. I think we have linked the template in the chat, or we will if we haven't. But you can just go ahead and press deploy, sign into your BigCommerce store, and it will set up and configure everything you need to get that running. Anything to add there, Ben? I think
that covers it. One of the things that we have to be clear about too is like, you're going to get that theme right now. So there would be a little bit of design and development to actually make it your own. But really, like a lot of developers are super passionate about using Next.js. Finding developers to build something, a unique storefront experience should not be a challenge. It's the most popular framework in the world. But yeah, the integration does make the connection at least quite seamless. And you can see the POC and pull in your products and just kind of get a demo of it quite quickly.
Yeah. We have 9 minutes left and we have 6 questions remaining. So I'm going to pick and choose a couple. But if there's anything that's left at the end that you still want an answer to that we haven't answered, we'll put our contact details up at the end and you can feel free to drop us a message at any point. So let's go for, so I like this one. So from your experience, how long does it take to migrate from a monolithic stack to a BigCommerce plus Vercel headless stack? So I can kind of cover off my knowledge and my understanding first, and then maybe we can go over to Ben for a bit of info from the BigCommerce side. So there is no real answer to this question, to be honest with you. It is how long is a piece of string? And there is a lot of factors that go into how long it would take. So how much data do you need to migrate into the new platform? Do you need to change any of your third parties that you're working with? How much development do you want to do on the front end? Like, would you be okay with something like the Next.js Commerce Starter Store, or would you want to customize it completely to resonate with your brand? In terms of assisting you to get to market as quickly as possible, I feel like the Joyent solution that we have is set up to get you to market as quickly as possible. We lay down the kind of starter template with the Next.js starter, so you're not building from scratch. And BigCommerce is one of the fastest platforms to get to market that exists.
Yeah, like you said, it's a big, it depends. Depends how many what systems you're working with, what sort of bottlenecks you have. Do you have a developer? As a brand, how complex is your brand? We have a lot of features and functionality in BigCommerce that you may take advantage of, and maybe it adds a little bit more complexity, but in general, if everything goes well, then it might take, only a few months to migrate over, but in reality, things come up, we know that, and it varies greatly depending on your situation.
Yeah. Next question. Let's go over this one. This is a bit spicy. So any advantages you can share for using Vercel for Next.js deployments instead of Netlify, AWS, etc. So I'm going to try and answer this one quite quickly because of time. I could speak about this for a long time, but we don't have a long time. But I'm going to split this into two threads. So first, we cover off AWS first. So something like AWS is more kind of self-hosting a Next.js deployment, and that comes with a multitude of problems. So when you self-host, you need to invest heavily in DevOps because you need someone to be responsible for building that infrastructure. You need to be responsible for maintaining that infrastructure. And the actual cost of doing that is a huge amount. And if you use something like Vercel, you can take that cost and redeploy it somewhere else. So you could redeploy it into improving the front end. You could redeploy it into different third parties that you want to integrate into your site, because we are doing a lot of that DevOps for you. Comparing to other providers like Netlify, for example, I think there'll be a lot of similarities between Vercel and other platforms like Netlify, for example. One of the key drivers for going for Next.js on Vercel is that we are the creators and maintainers of Next.js. So this has a couple of benefits. Number one, when we release new functionality, is going to be supported from day one, as I mentioned earlier. So you're not waiting for your platform provider to catch up with those developments. We have a lot of beta programs that we invite our customers into. So when we're kind of testing and launching new functionality, you can take part in those beta programs and directly influence the product direction of Next.js and Vercel. And of course, from a kind of post-sales or professional solution side, we can also provide support around Next.js, best practices, implementation, and so on. I think we have time for maybe one more question. I'm just going to put our contact details up on the slide. So if you've got any questions about what we've talked about today, you want to speak to BigCommerce or Vercel in a bit more detail about any of these solutions, please just feel free to drop us a line. You can get Ben on Twitter. I don't like Twitter, so I don't use it, but you can drop me an email.
I don't really use Twitter either.
So,
you can probably find me, just look up my name. It's pretty easy. It's pretty unusual name.
And then we have a form. We have a form as well. So I think you can scan that QR code and you can fill out a form to get in touch with us as well. Let me pick one more question and then I think we will wrap up. Going headless, this is a good question. Going headless takes a while. Are there small changes we could make now / without changing our entire stack? So yeah, going headless can take a while. If you're already working with a platform like BigCommerce, you could actually use a strategy to incrementally adopt a headless front end. And a lot of our customers will do this that have large existing websites. So what this typically looks like is you pick maybe 1 page or 2 pages that you want to adopt headless for. And for those 2 pages, maybe it's a listing page or a PDP, you send all of the traffic to those two pages, and that goes to your headless implementation. And then for the rest of the traffic, so your search page, your category page, cart, checkout, you send back to the existing application. So Next.js has a functionality called rewrites, which allows you to do that. So it basically says, if the URL is /product/something, go through to the headless implementation. If the URL is /checkout, we're going to send that back through into the existing application. And that is a pretty well-trodden path for us. We see a lot of customers taking that kind of incremental adoption approach to really reduce risk and give them more time to build out the headless implementation.
Yeah, the incremental adoption is on the BigCommerce side too. Like the way we think about it too is like you can go with Stencil and graduate, like I was saying before. But that really allows you to kind of get your merchandising done and get kind of prepared, and then start working independently on the front end. If you're using Next.js deployed to Vercel, kind of work independently there and then kind of migrate over to it. And you could do that on a page by page basis, like just kind of slowly kind of migrate things over and then kind of be fully on the new platform. But you don't have to do it all at once. You can do one at a time, or you can use different tools too. You don't have to migrate all of the components too. You might not use search, for example, merchandising. You might later add on something like Algolia, or you might add functionality as you go, and you kind of can use the baked in tooling that we provide. There's some capabilities for search, and maybe you just enhance it later. So there's all these, you can slowly kind of move your over from one to the next, or like Matt was talking about with, if you're on another legacy platform, you can do that on a page by page basis and do that in parallel.
And I think with that, we're at time. So thank you so much for joining, everybody. I hope it was useful. And Ben, thank you for joining. Thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom from the BigCommerce side. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the holiday period.
Yeah.
Bye.